Welcome to Picture Me Coding with Eric Aker and Mike Moll. And our old friend, Bob Farzin, came back. Hi, Bob.
Hey, Eric. How's it going?
Bob, I think you've been on our show more than any other guest. We love having you on. Thank you for hanging out with us again.
Glad to be a friend of the show.
Is this episode 4 maybe you've been on? Have you been on 4 of our episodes? Something like
It's
that.
either three or four. We're still in single digits.
I think you're an honorary co-host at this point in time.
I feel that way too, Bob. It's always
Thanks.
fun having you to hang out with us. We're so happy to have you hanging out with us. And today, the three of us have been having a long-term conversation about agent coding. And so that's what we want to talk about today. Now, here's how I want to set this up. Last month in the New York Times, there was this kind of silly article about so-called TokenMaxxing. And TokenMaxxing, it's either got 2 or 3 X's in it when you do a maxing, when you take a noun and you put maxing on it. TokenMaxxing was like, the New York Times article said that there are these software engineers at software companies, and they're competing over how many agent coding tokens they can burn in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year. And apparently at Meta, one of the workers there set up this leaderboard called Claudenomics, and it ranked colleagues by their individual token consumption, and it gave them titles like Token Legend. And apparently the Meta employees, they were consuming 60 trillion tokens in a month. And the top user there apparently used 280 million tokens on average every month. And this article came out and people were kind of like pointing and laughing, I think. After the article came out, and the apparently the employee who made the leaderboard took it down. But then there was a Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA. He was on a podcast and he was like, yes, this is absolutely right. He was quoted widely. He said on the podcast, if your $500,000 engineer is not spending $250,000 in tokens, something is wrong. No, okay. So Claude Code came out 1 year ago, May 2025. And I got to say, I feel like everybody I know is using it. I'm using it. Mike and Bob, you guys are using it. Yeah.
Yep.
We are.
So things are pretty different where we're sitting right here from a year ago, 2026. And for me, things got a little weird at the very beginning of this year and towards the end of last year. And sure, the agents got better, but things got weird with Steve Yegge's GasTown post. I want to start with that. So let's start by talking about GasTown. Mike, you read the GasTown thing, right? You want to tell us about it?
I did. I believe you sent it to me, and it came out on New Year's Day of this year. My initial reaction to it was, this is so fucking crazy. This has got to be some sort of joke. And even now when I read it. So just to lay the groundwork a little bit, I already knew a lot of people using Claude Code. I knew a lot of people, including Bob, using lots of agents, and we're running a bunch of simultaneous agents and so forth. So it's not like the concepts here were new to me, but the way he sets it up just seemed insane to me. I want to read a couple of things from it just to give you a flavor. He says pretty early on, first of all, the code base is under 3 weeks old on a scale of polished diamond to uncut rough to I just smuggled it 400 miles upriver in my ass. I'm going to characterize GasTown as you probably don't want to use it yet.
that chunk is like a pretty good introduction to the flavor of the piece. The tone.
Yeah, that sets the tone, and he's pretty serious about the fact that this is like a sharp knife that you want to be careful with. But a little bit lower down is another line that kind of stuck with me, which it says, work becomes fluid, an uncountable substance that you sling around freely like slopping shiny fish into wooden barrels at the docks. Most work gets done, some work gets lost, fish fall out of the barrel, some escape back to sea or get stepped on. More fish will come. The focus is throughput, creation and correction at the speed of thought. There's a few lines in the piece that were like this, and I just was like, this sounds like a way to make the most complex, unmanageable, unmaintainable thing. And it still does, 4 months later.
It sounds like spaghetti code at scale. Bob, what's your take on GasTown? Tell us, you read GasTown, and I think, Bob, I sent you the GasTown piece. I was like, Bob, you got to read this thing. It's weird. It's long, but it's weird. And I think I got like 3 messages from you over weeks at a time where you were like, yeah, I'm reading GasTown. Oh, yeah, I'm reading GasTown. Like, you read it like a bunch of times, didn't you?
Yeah, I went through it a few times. I was really trying to get my head around what he was doing relative to what I had been trying to do. And some of the things he said seemed consistent with me. Like, he's got this idea of I can't remember what they're all called, but like the watcher, and there's a watcher of the watcher. So there's like not just a watcher that's checking these polecats do the work, but there's a watcher of the watcher. And I kind of have encountered things like that where it's like you've got an agent, you've asked it to stay focused on something, and then you need to watch the agent yourself or have something else kick it in the pants and tell it, no, you're supposed to be doing it this way. Mm-hmm. So there were certain things that I could relate to there where I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And there were other things that a little bit like Mike kind of troubled me. Like, he's using the system beads, which we'll get to talking about. And I had heard of Yegge and beads and had read a post about that beforehand. And so I kind of knew some of his take on things. And I think his general genre of blog post is you probably don't want to use this. Like, he likes creating a barrier to people to even testing things in any way. So, but this idea that like you could have multiple agents trying to do the same work at the same time and then all competing to submit that work to the merge queue as quickly as possible, that seemed weird. That's not how humans would work, right? We wouldn't say like, oh, all 3 of us should pick up the same Jira ticket and we should all be working on it, and whoever merges it first should get it in. At the same time, I have been in organizations where it felt like a slow version of that. Like, there were definitely situations where it was like, oh, this person's working on that project, but this other person's going to actually try to get the PR in first without telling them. So there were things about it where it seemed a little bit like it was just a scaled up version of a, par for the course startup model. Like, we're just going to throw lots of agents at this and hope we get something downstream. It definitely pushed me to try to do more parallel work after I read it. And I experienced some of the mental strain he talks about in that article, where you just get really worn out.
So I think that when I read GasTown, I was like, this is crazy. It's absolutely just bonkers. And I think that what you pointed out, like he draws these barriers. You don't want to use this. You're probably not ready for this. This is probably crazy. You probably don't even want to look at this. You should stop reading now. There's a lot of that type of language. Like I only want the most committed people to be on the team, on the wagon with me. That GasTown piece is over 8,000 words of text. If you pick up a magazine like long form journalism and you read the longest article in there, maybe it's 5,000 words, right? That's a long piece of text. 8,000 words for his GasTown announcement. That's like 20 pages of a magazine. Like that is an extremely long article. And he has all these terms that he's invented. He's got his GasTown, he's got his mayor, he's got his deacon, he's got his polecats. And so you start with that in like the first third of it. And there's this crazy phenomenon where he doesn't stop inventing names for things, for abstracting. Like, he's just constantly, like, every time he runs into some cul-de-sac, he just dreams up some new name. Like, oh, I'll just have a new name for this idea and we'll just drive the truck through it. And it's like the abstractions are there to, like, anytime you block forward progress, you need a new abstraction. And it's just like, it's absolutely a bonkers way to build a thing. It just boggles the mind. And I think people looked at it and they're like, what the fuck is this guy talking about?
Yeah.
Not long before this, I had read the William T. Vollmann novel, You Bright and Risen Angels, which is very weird. And so for For about the first week after I read this post, I was pretty convinced it was a piece of experimental fiction.
Hmm. Well, I think the interesting thing for me when I read Yegge's piece, GasTown and Beads, is there's a kernel of an idea that seems like there's a true thing underneath there. If you want to use agents to write code, you can get a lot more done if you can figure out how to orchestrate them. Just talking to a single like Claude code session and saying, do this, do that, do this, do that. It's slow. It's a little bit painful, but if you want to really produce interesting work that's larger scale, you do have to figure out how to coordinate or orchestrate. And so he's been talking about that for over a year. And that seems true. And then I look at GasTown and I'm like, why would you build something insane as a response to this core problem you've identified?
Yeah, I think that one of the things he levers in Gastown is this idea that there's a couple things about using agents that people can and probably should lean on. And one of them is they never get tired. They don't care how many times you ask them to do the same thing again and again. And if you had a way to measure truth, they might have high variance on their output, but they're generally going to zone in on the right solution or a measure of right solution that you guide it towards if you sampled enough times from the distribution. So like an annoying thing about agents is that they're stochastic in their output. So you don't know necessarily on any one pass what they're going to tell you and whether it's going to work. But if you can average across many of them, you generally converge on things that generally work. Now, there's lots of reasons to not do that, but I think that one of the things he's getting to is, well, if you just kind of the whole scaling hypothesis for language models in general, like if you just scale enough, if you just have enough agents working on this problem, you're probably going to get something that works. Like you'll probably have an output that's viable. And I think that that's a kernel of truth that I got out of that, and I had experienced to some degree. So that part definitely resonated with me. But the mechanism of how these things interact seemed like crazy talk.
Yeah.
He did
Is
turn
it
me
fair
on
to
to
call
this
that a
idea of,
shotgun approach there, Bob? Can we call that a shotgun approach? Just sort of blast as many as you can?
I think there's an element of, yeah, blast as many as you can with like some knowledge of how you're going to average your outputs or like what you're going to use. But I think that one thing that he talked about in there that I just like lifted directly was this idea of messaging between agents, which I don't think I've talked to you guys about, but I had an experience where I told an agent that another agent was working on something that might be related. And that agent said to me unprompted, "Hey, I'm going to write a note, a markdown note. Will you pass it to the other agent and tell the other agent that this is what I'm doing?" So I dutifully did my middle manager job and I took the note. I passed it to the other agent, and the second agent replied back by saying, "I read the note. This is very helpful," as it always says. And then it said, "Will you please pass this note back to agent A?"
Wow.
Acknowledging that I've received the message. So there's an idea of like messaging between agents to try to coordinate, which I think I had not thought of, but he had mentioned in passing in that GasTown article that he had a messaging system so that the Polecat agents or one level of agents could talk to each other about what they were doing or where they were stuck or what their problem was. And that was another sort of idea or concept I lifted.
There was a response by Steve Klobnik. Steve Klobnik's well known in the Rust world, but also open source in general. He wrote one of the most widely read books about Rust, and he was really involved in the development, the community, the Rust community. But he has this post called "How to Think About GasTown," and he says, on the one hand, Yegge here, he's building a system for building software, but he's also doing something kind of bigger and weirder. Here's a quote. Klobnik writes, "GasTown is aggressively not rigorous. And while rigor is a great value to have when you're in an experimental mindset, relaxing rigor can be a valid strategy to move forward." What do you think about that, Mike?
Well, I would definitely agree with the not rigorous part. There's a thing in here that I do sort of like, which is I can imagine this system where you have this sort of Cambrian explosion of different ideas, and most of them die, and some of them turn out to be good and persistent. But what I miss in this process is the thing where the bad things how you direct the bad things to die and the good things to survive. It seems like it needs some constraints to tell the system, these are what I expect the good things to do, and that those are the things that I want to carry on. And Bob has talked about this offline of he has ways of sort of building ensembles of things and picking the things that work best.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think I like this line from Klobnik that it's aggressively not rigorous, but I think it doesn't go far enough. I think it's not only aggressively not rigorous, it's aggressively not software engineering. Like Yegge is like, I'm not reading the code. I'm never reading the code. I myself, I don't want to do that. I'm using agents to write code. I'm reading the stuff. It's gonna go on my GitHub. I'm gonna be like, yeah, I had an agent help me write this, but it's not garbage. Okay, I read it. I didn't read all of it, but I read a lot of it. It's structured in a way that makes sense. It's like Yegge is aggressively not doing software engineering. He's not trying to build the right thing under real world constraints. He's trying to maximize the throughput of the software. And it's like he's not even validating what is it there underneath. It's like, hey, you might produce total garbage, but can I get as much garbage as possible per second? That's a crazy goal. It's also like, it's like he's aggressively like, yeah, we're doing something new, so we're not gonna. I mean, the guy's aware of engineering principles certainly, but he's just like, we're not going to consider those.
Can we take like a hypothesis here? Is this like where you're like you're throwing the pass ahead of where the person's going to be? Like if we had gone back 2 years ago, not even 2 years ago, I would say 18 months ago, and looked at like Copilot, like that thing wouldn't even close parentheses sometimes. It would forget what it was writing. It would write a bunch of repeated things. And now in 18 months, we're at a place where pretty reliably the code that comes out does something. It definitely does something. And it often does what I asked it to do. And it's fairly messy underneath. And it's not always following my design principles, no matter how much I tell it. But I remember a time last summer, so only a few months after Claude Code came out, where no matter how much I told it in Python, like imports go at the top, imports go at the top.
I hate that so much.
And it would put them in the middle.
Yeah.
I've actually found it does a lot less imports in the middle now than it ever did before. Maybe I'm a unique case. Maybe I've given it other guidance and it's attuned itself, but it's pretty much gotten that message somewhere in the system, somewhere in the improvement. So if you're leading the pass here a little bit and you think, okay, he's building the system for next year where these things actually build really good code underneath that you don't need to review, like that's a way in my head I try to square that circle a little bit. How does that land with you guys?
Hate it. Mike, what do you think?
I've had that same sort of philosophical thought, is that, what he's trying to do here is anticipate where things are going and just build the thing that's going to be the thing that everybody uses, a couple of years from now. He doesn't want to try to outwit the AIs by telling them too much. And so she's just kind of trying to figure out ways to maximize the stuff that comes out the end and hope that the AIs will some sort of structure will emerge from that. That's my best take on this, I guess.
I see where you guys are going. Hey, this is what systems in the future are. This is how they're going to be built in the future. But I think Yegge's experiment is like, it's mostly going to be like a weird art project in the future. And that there are kernels of what he's doing that are going to be integrated. Sure. The messaging, mailboxing idea, the way in which we break up work into smaller chunks, there's a kernel of truth in there. Let's talk about beads next, because that's a key thing here. So before Yegge published the GasTown piece at the beginning of this year, New Year's Day, last October, he published his piece on Medium about beads. It's called Introducing Beads, a Coding Agent Memory System. And I read about this and I heard it. I didn't really get it. I read it and I was like, wow, this guy looks like he really needs to get more sleep. He looks like he's not sleeping enough. And I didn't get it. And then I started doing agent stuff this year and I went back and I got it. I got the problem. Don't necessarily love the answer, but I got the problem. I think the problem was is right there, well stated. So he starts by describing in the Beats post how he's been addictively vibe coding stuff for months. The tone of this article, similar to the GasTown piece, but not quite as unhinged. It's not 8,000 words. It's a lot of words, but it's not, 20 pages of just bizarre, like, what in the hell is going on? He says he has these 3 photos he starts with, and he says on the left, we have me vibe coding on the beach at dinner in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. In the middle, we have a picture of me taking a picture of myself driving 60 miles an hour on the freeway up to Bellingham, picking up some guitars, vibe coding by voice the whole way there and back. Stupid and dangerous as hell. Didn't care. Got stuck in traffic for hours. Still didn't care. Did I mention it's addictive? In the final frame, he writes, my wife and I are at the mall last week enjoying a nice afternoon of coffee, people watching, and vibe coding. I didn't go anywhere or do anything, not even sleep, without my laptop. So this is Yegge last year, October 2025. I read that and I'm like, wow, should we be concerned for this guy? This is how he introduces beads. So then he goes on to describe how he built heaps of software pre this beads announcement. He says, I built a lot of stuff that sucked. You start out, it's great. You start making progress. You build it up. You get bigger and bigger. It falls over. You burn it all down. It sucks. And this is something that I had heard people hitting. They would add more and more code using agents. It would get to this point where the agents just couldn't make any more progress. They would like ram their car into a cul-de-sac and they would stop and everything turns into melting garbage. It's just like heaps and heaps of crap that doesn't make any sense after a while. So I've heard a lot of stories about this. Agents, they make questionable choices. They duplicate like crazy. They build something they cannot maintain. So his solution was to make this thing that sounds ridiculously mundane. He's like, you know what? I'm going to build like Jira for agents. It's such a dumb idea, but such a brilliant idea in a way. It's so basic. He would start with these markdown docs, and this is what he says in beads. You get these markdown docs to plan, and then the markdown docs are large. It's like markdown doc is this whole thing I want to do. And then you've got like checklists in there. So you feed the markdown doc to the agent and then it reads the entire thing. And then it has to go to section 5. And then it has to check off the check mark. I was doing this stuff last year and it inevitably would suck after a while. And Yegge identifies the problem as you give them the entire history, the whole past, the present, and the future every single time you ask them to do something, and they suck at it. So we need something that breaks the work up into smaller chunks. So Beads is like this distributed system. It's like a sort of a Git database. It's a Git-backed database, oddly. And it's like an agent work manager sort of thing, and it track relationships between the work. And then there's this weird landing the plane part of it, which is just Yegge flavor. Bob, you've actually used Beads. You've used Beads.
Yeah.
I've never actually used it. I know people who've used it. Tell us about your experience using it.
I think my experience is pretty close to the description you gave there, Eric. I mean, I started by like having these big markdown documents, which I would spend a lot of time iteratively building with an agent. And at that point, agent context windows were maybe 200,000 tokens. And then by the time you said, okay, load up the plan, load up the files, read everything to figure out what we're working on, and you had some maybe other helper files that were loaded, you were at like 60% of your context or 70% of your context. Then it was like, okay, do these 3 things. Now summarize what you've done so that the next agent can pick this up, and then the next agent would pick it up, and like you would end up in these very short windows. And the beads idea has had several sort of positive side effects in my workflow, but one of them has been that it breaks it down like Jira to these very concrete steps, and then the parallelization becomes pretty obvious. There's all these like raw build steps or raw research steps that need to be done. I can give that to 4 different agents, and I can tell them, tell me what's going on, tell me what you're going to build, go do this build, and show up with it. And then I can do those all in parallel. And now I get this big parallel step as opposed to this big project that, like you said, that big planning document. And the second thing is that I think that the sort of accuracy of what you're going to build improves by a lot as well, because now you're just building that very finite thing. And the thing that I've gotten now after a few months of using it is that the bead, since it's a database, can go back and I can say, wait, we had an issue that was like that go back and find it in the beads that we've closed, figure out what we did there, where the supporting documents are, that's effectively my internal wiki for it, see what our solution was, and then use that again. Like, this sounds like that other thing, and it can kind of go in and look back at what it's done and how it's done it, feed these pieces all together, which I also find very useful, more useful than I thought it would be to like track what's been done. Now, there's a huge downside of beads for me, which has been that agents love filing beads. They like every time they do a piece of work, they're like, oh, I'm going to do this work. But actually, there's these 5 other things that we could do. I'm going to just go file beads for that. And if you don't, and they defer actually completing the work, they'll do like a portion of the work and then be like, I'm going to close this bead and then I'm going to file a new one for the rest of the work. And you're like, no, you didn't achieve the goal here. Like, they're totally doing the like intern junior developer thing where you're like, I need you to go make this work. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm done. You're like,
Shipped
okay,
it.
can we look at what
Did
that?
you test
All right,
it?
you didn't. Yeah,
Didn't test
exactly. I love when they also. I mean, all these agents are infamous in my mind for doing that, where they'll write stuff. They're like, I know the answer to this. I see it clearly now. And then they'll write a bunch of code and they'll say, this is done. I'm going to close the bead. And I'm like, have we run any of the code you wrote? Do we know that any of it even works? How might it break? What are we going to? So you really come in as like a project manager, senior developer when you're interacting with sort of beads flavored agents.
But so, Bob, distributed? Do you need it distributed? Do you need to be able to do beads and like blast them out and have other people working on beads, or you on different machines working on beads? Is that a feature that you need or use?
I think that would be a good use case. I've struggled to make that work well myself. I'm not as hands off using beads as Yegge seems to indicate in his GasTown article, where it's like, I don't really care who picks up the bead and I don't really care what they do. I use it more as a Jira system where I'm the sort of scrum leader and I'm checking every piece of work that's getting done and understanding how it's getting built. So I'm under a more controlled paradigm. So distributed is not a key feature for me.
Do you land the plane?
I never write land the plane.
Never. You keep talking about agents. You have actually like written agents yourself to use beads, or are you using other agents that people have written? Now we kind of a little bit fuzzy terminology here, right? Like Claude Code we call that a coding agent, but you can write an agent. It's a system prompt or a user prompt, right? Or it's a system prompt. So you say you are of this type of role and you do these types of things. And oh, by the way, I want you to use beads when you do X or you see Y. Do you have those? Did you write those? Did you copy those?
I do have those. I do. I'm using, when I say agent, I mean a Claude Code session harness, as people sometimes call that has access to tools and it can do whatever work it wants in that local directory or on that machine for that matter. And it can just sort of run at full speed if it wants to with, bypass permissions is enabled in my cases. Yes, I have like a system prompt that says you're going to use beads and here are the rules about using beads. And when you write code, you're going to test it and so on and so on. And that's been also an iterative process. I think early on I did more iteration trying to specify what I wanted. And now it's less frequent that I'm like, oh, this thing is completely misunderstanding what's going on.
Mike, what do you think about beads? Jira? Is that what you wanted to hear? We need Jira. Let me stop building stuff and build Jira.
I have not used beads in anger. I do think I like the concept, and mostly because I've adopted your BMO system for many of the projects I'm working on.
Yeah, in fact, Bob, I've been using this BMO thing a lot, and the problems you're describing that you have, I'm not having those problems because the explicit instructions I have in my system are you do not merge stuff. That's another thing. A lot of these tools that people are using, it's like they're magically merging things. That kind of horrifies me. I don't want to merge stuff. I want to see what the diff is. I want to see it in a PR maybe or a diff. I don't want you to merge stuff. I want to merge it. If it's good, I want to throw it away if it's not good. So I have a number of different agent roles, and the agents I have maybe say a senior a senior software engineer agent, and it will take on a single BMO task, which is the equivalent of a beat. But BMO is not distributed. It's just super stupid, like CLI on top of a SQLite database. It's very dumb. There is no landing the plane. So it's like a senior engineer will take a single ticket. It's not allowed to close the ticket by its instructions. A staff engineer must review the result. In the context, I've got instructions like you need to run the tests. You need to run the linter. You need to
Yeah.
make sure that these things are valid. Otherwise, the work's not done. The staff engineer reviews it, and staff engineer says, "This is pretty good here. We can't complete this because there's a huge bug in here." And it leaves it. You're talking about like you're giving these markdown docs from agent A to agent B. This all happens on comments on these BMO issues.
Yeah.
So it's like staff engineer leaves a comment on the issue and says, "Kick it back to in progress." Project manager orchestration agent kicks it back to the senior engineer. Senior engineer picks up that ticket, or new one picks up that ticket, sees what's done, sees the comment, sees what needs to be done. Then it gets done. Staff engineer reviews it again. It'll go through multiple rounds of work on it, review it, work on it, review it. It is not a cheap way to use Claude Code tokens, by the way, but the output that I've seen, that I've gotten, and I've been doing this for a few months now, it's dramatically better than what I would have thought was possible last year, middle of the summer.
So I have a question for you, Eric. How does this land with you? This idea of giving a sort of profile description to each one of these characters in your play.
So I really took this idea from a guy I hung out with at Scale. So I can't really claim a lot of credit for it. And I took his idea for BMO. He had a thing called Docket, which actually might have been invented by Steve Klobnik. Maybe he told me that and I totally didn't know Steve Klobnik had made Docket. So BMO is just a total like, software like fork and hack and steal and whatnot, like just re-implementation. I tried to read a bunch of research about the definitions of agents and skills. And there are papers from a few years ago where they're like, if you tell an agent, if you give it a prompt that's like, you are a QA engineer, then it
Mm-hmm.
works really hard to sound like a QA engineer and accuracy actually declines. But I feel like this type of analysis is sort of above my pay grade. All I know, Bob, is I'm getting really high quality code and I get to review it before it gets merged. And
Nice.
yeah, I'm getting a massive amount of parallelization and I'm not dealing with Git work trees, which is a complexity I don't want to deal with. Now, I don't know if we want to talk about work trees. Um, I don't have an opinion about that. I probably shouldn't speak so much without an opinion. Why do you raise it? Do you have an opinion, Bob?
I remember, I think it was on one of our shared sort of offline conversations where we talked about like you go in and look at some of the prompts that people have shared on GitHub, and they're like the kindest thing I can say about them is that they're comical. They're just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
you are a senior Bay Area
Yes.
engineer with 20
Yes.
years of
Yes.
experience,
Yeah.
and you're a C++
Yeah.
master and
Exactly.
GitHub ninja, blah, blah, blah. And they just go on, and you're like,
Yeah.
really? Like they
Yeah.
really need to say that? Like that seems like
What's the problem we're solving here? Yeah.
like what does that even mean, and how much of that is relevant? And in machine learning they have this concept of the ablation study. The ablation study is where you go through and you like remove one feature at a time, or one part of your claimed improvement process at a time. And when they publish the paper, usually they're showing that all of their components were significant for their mean squared error reduction or whatever. Oh, we did this and we did these four things. We did an ablation study where we removed number one and it decreased by this much. Then we did one where we only removed number two, and it's only the ensemble of all four of them that's valuable. I mean, I don't have the patience and the time and the token budget to do it, but I would love an ablation study on this kind of nonsense where it's
Yes.
like you write
Yes.
4 paragraphs. If I reduce that to 3 sentences, does it matter? Does it have
Yes.
an effect? And like, where are these things relevant? And I think there's a lot of space for a lot of studies like that, but they just require a huge amount of token burn, because for you to get this confidence around BMO has taken a lot of use, right? And
Yep. Yep.
review on your behalf. If I went back and said, okay, let's rewind, I'm going to redefine all of your characters with these new paragraphs. Now tell me which one is better or worse. That's pretty hard. That's going to be a lot of
That's
time.
that you hit on the thing that really has bothered me the whole time doing this. I can't tell you what subtle magic is involved in the terminology used to define the agents that makes a difference. It's completely unscientific and that bothers the shit out of me. And there's like thousands of repos on GitHub that are like, I've got these great agents, and you've got Gary Tan, the Y Combinator guy, who's like, I'm shipping hundreds of thousands of lines of code, so you should use my agents. And the one you mentioned to me was the most ridiculous and absurd example. I don't want to throw them under the bus, but the Claude code base was leaked on April Fool's Day, and in order to get around cease and desist or takedown requests, a group of developers re-implemented Claude Code using Claude Code. And they were like, yeah, we used our cool system, which you can use too. We're going to charge users to use our agent coding system. And it turns out their agent coding system is just like a bucket of agents and skills. And you go and you look at their like agent, and it's got this like mythical name like Prometheus. And it starts with, you are an SF Bay Area engineer. And I just see that. I just feel embarrassed for these people. Like, oh my God, I'm so ashamed to be reading this. This is god awful. You're going to tell me that this thing produces quality code? That's bullshit. You are deceiving yourself.
The other thing I'll throw out there is that before, like with all of these LLM systems, before they even get to our use, there's a whole system prompt and setup that's behind the curtain that we don't see.
So can we focus on that for a second? Because the Claude Code really, so at the beginning of this year, I used Copilot CLI, right? And then I used Claude Code, and Claude Code is better. The quality is better. It's prompting me less for permissions. It's way smoother. I can actually set up a Claude Code session with my BMO setup. I could go, hey, do this. And then it'll be like, I think this is what I want to do. Are you cool with that? I'll say yes. I'll go away for hours. I'll come back. It'll be done. Like, that can't happen with Copilot. I was like, why is Claude Code better? The Claude Code source code release, it turns out that Claude Code is just a bucket of agents too. And I was like, so disillusioned.
It's turtles all the way down, Eric. Yeah. That's how it works.
Yeah. Why is their magical combination of agents any better than anybody? I jumped in front of you. I just wanted to mention that it was like disillusioning for me. Mostly it's model, right? The model gets better and better and better. And these agents are like 5% salt and pepper, but there's zero scientific attempt on the part of most people using the things to validate how they're constructed and why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, if you're an aggressive user of the raw Claude Code system, you actually can start to feel the flavor of when they change the prompt before they announce they've changed the prompt. If you're using it every day for a few hours systematically and you're doing similar things every day, you notice days where you're like, wait a second, this is wrong. Something's wrong. And then you have this like, I must have something wrong. And you start looking around all your code. You do the usual like developer thing. You're like, it's looking at the wrong source file. It's on the wrong branch. Like something's wrong. You're going around and you just can't figure it out. And then it turns out a week later, they make some announcement on their blog that's like, oh yeah, we changed the prompt and it screwed up all the kind of code that was written in this style. And we reverted that and we fixed it and now we've improved it. And the underlying model has changed. I mean, over this year, we've gone from a sort of sonnet with a low level opus to this like really high level in the Anthropic universe, but it's been the same everywhere else, to this sort of much higher level, much more capable model. And the thing I'm always struggling to disambiguate is like, is anything I'm doing improving things? Yeah. Or am I standing on top of this rising wave and everything's getting improved around me and I'm on top of this thing that just keeps getting bigger and better all the time. And I think, oh, I'm making this go higher. Like that must be me. But the wave is like building under me, right? That's a cognitive dissonance I cannot reconcile because like you're saying, it's not science. I can't control the model and the prompt and say, lock on that model and prompt, only work with that. Let me see what I can do. And if I did do that, then I'm left behind on all the things that are progressing. So that's kind of one of many mental strains I feel doing this work.
Yeah, it's like you almost need like, what is that? K-fold cross-validation type of thing?
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about, like with ablation. Like you would need that with different, like subtle changes to your agents on the exact same prompt over and over and over again.
Yeah.
One thing I like about BMO is that you also have this set of agents that works with BMO, and those agents map onto things that I can understand. So, there's software engineers and staff engineers and project planners and QA engineers and so forth. And then Yegge has his like mayor and deacons and polecats.
And then there's like 4,000 other terms that he invents. I feel
But
that way too.
in all these cases, the agents are basically mapping onto human-like roles that we can understand, or maybe not understand in the case of Yegge. I do wonder if there's a sense in which we are sort of projecting our beliefs about how these processes should work onto the agents or onto the AIs and not letting them do things in ways that may be actually more optimal for that system. Does that make any
I
sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think that points again at this potential that we may not even read this code or validate it in the future. And I'm not eager to pursue that possibility. I don't trust it. I want I want to sign off on it. I want to know that. I mean, it's like you go to the doctor. The doctor's like, "Yeah, the AI says you've got lung cancer." It's like, okay, but did a human look at it too? Like, can we just have at least one person look at it just to say, "Yeah, it probably is," or probably, "Yeah, I agree." I don't know.
But
I'm not
I brought this
satisfied by
up. I
that.
brought this up with you guys on a again offline from this conversation about I never look at the compiled code. I don't know what machine instructions are being written at the lowest level. Like
Well,
I
I mean, you're
have
talking about a
no idea.
deterministic process, Bob. That's deterministic, right? A compiler.
Well, no, it's not determined. I mean, at the processor level, right? Isn't there like where it goes down and tries to forecast some of the
Oh
possible
yeah, yeah.
branching, and it
Yeah,
moves a
there's
bunch of bits,
I
and I just never. Now, if I went back to the 70s and I told somebody like I never look at the machine code, like I don't care what the punch card says, I'm gonna just be up here writing this Java thing, and there's gonna be this virtual machine, and I'm gonna ignore blah blah blah, and the hardware is just going to deal with it. Like they would look at me like I had snakes growing out of my head, right? It
I
would
don't
just be like, "What
I
is
don't buy
wrong with
that.
you?
I don't
You
buy
don't
that
think
it's a
that you don't
layer of
think that
abstractness.
maps?"
I don't Yeah, to me it just doesn't fit, but I won't Mike, you go ahead.
I kind of like the analogy, but I do think it is a little bit different. Even with things like speculative execution in the CPU, they are ultimately deterministic. I mean, they do end up executing one branch or the other, not both of them. So I am still at the point where I am not entirely comfortable just assuming that the code is doing what the system says it's doing it. But
Mhm.
the converse of that is that so many people are at that point now, and there are people who are clearly good engineers. It's not just like people who are former product managers who now can write code. There's people like Karpathy and Wes McKinney who are in this mode too, where they are no longer really reading the code. And
Mhm.
I have to agree with Bob that that is sort of like where we're at now and where we're moving. Is that the idea of a human being in the loop somewhere to actually review the code before it goes into production is probably slipping away.
I don't know if I fully buy it. Let's look at the patterns though. What are the patterns that are emerging here? Number one, Yegi says orchestration. To be able to orchestrate coding agents is the key problem. He's right. Number two, you can't feed them huge amounts of like planning markdown docs. That was the way we were doing it last year and the year before. Not going to work. That's also right. We need to break up work into small chunks. This BMO thing or beads, there's like dozens of projects like that where people are doing the exact same thing. It's like it's a database or it's exploded into smaller markdown files and whatever. There's a lot of people doing exactly that. McKinney was talking about doing stuff like that. He's got his own tooling that he built. So orchestration, smaller units of work, um, coordinating is part of orchestration, and but I don't think that like you look at what McKinney's doing, it's not like I don't think he's saying I'm never ever going to read this. You're not going to read all of it. They're shipping a lot more code. I mean, same with me. I'm using these tools at work now, and I did like 30,000 lines across two different projects of pull requests changes. But I lived with those changes for about a week because it was like iterating and oh, is it working? And oh, okay, I see how this is going. And I ended up reading probably decent chunks of it. I at least had a map of it in my head, and I'm okay with that. I'm not shipping 100,000 lines, and I'm okay with that. But I am going from one 4,000 line PR in a week, which is a lot for me, to two 30,000 lines total, and I'm relatively comfortable with them. It's an increase in productivity that is undeniable, but I don't know. I just like Yega's like let's get in this car and light it on fire because it's going to be on fire someday anyway, and we're going to drive as fast as possible.
Just to be clear, I
Yeah.
am philosophically not at all comfortable with this idea.
Why
You
not?
know, I've always been the sort of person who likes to think of an idea and then sit on the couch for a couple of days before I really jump into it. And so the idea that you're going to whip up a plan with the agent in 10 minutes and then tell it to go and just walk away and come back when it's done, I don't like it. Part of it is probably because it's, replacing the profession that I enjoyed for 40 years, but there's just something very uncomfortable to me about this process. And clearly the world doesn't care. I really have been in a process recently of trying to figure out where that model doesn't work. Are there clearly places where this breaks down? I heard an analogy that sort of appealed to me that I got from one of my sons, which he got from another colleague of his, of thinking of these systems as like autopilot, like
Hmm.
in autopilot in jets.
Yeah.
And the argument that was proposed is that after autopilot was put into jets, the pilots had less responsibility. They didn't have to do seat of the pants flying anymore. But on the converse side, they actually had to be more sophisticated because their responsibility now was dealing with situations that came up that the autopilot couldn't handle.
Mm.
So I'm taking a little bit of solace in the idea that maybe these systems are building the 90% that, would have been not the most interesting parts of the project anyway. And there's this 10% or 5% or 2% or something like that, which is going to take some human eyeballs or some human expertise to sort of get the plane on the ground.
I think that there were two things you said there, Mike, that kind of landed with me. One of them was this idea of like, I like sitting on the couch with the idea. I think that I agree with that. There's an element of reflection that gets taken out. But for me, a flip side of that is that when I try to do it on my own, even small barriers discourage me from starting or completing a task. I look at it and I'm like, oh, I'd have to outline that. And then I'd have to start writing that code. And that might be a challenge. And here it's like, how about you just write me a first pass on this? And then I can edit it. And then I can change it. Then I could modify it. Then I could look at it again. Then I could have a different agent look at it again. So my velocity of trying things or completing things has gone up, but I probably don't reflect enough on some of the things when they show up because of exactly like that autopilot problem. But I do agree with you. I think that I now only get hard questions, and he kind of talked about this again, Yegge, in the GasTown post. Like, you start getting these really hard questions that come back as opposed to easy questions, and the framework of the day kind of shifts because of that.
I think I agree with what you guys are saying. I miss that reflective, like I'm going to walk around because I hit some problem with my design. But yeah, I there's a lot of activation energy that it takes. There's like this threshold. Is that the word? Is that the word? I always forget what it is in chemistry. Like
Yeah,
activation threshold.
that's the term, and I've encountered the same thing. Just in the last week, I've been trying to write some code for the GPUs on my Mac, and I know nothing about the metal shading language that you have to use, and I haven't done C++ professionally for 20 years, so I've just been basically asking Claude to do it for
Mm-hmm.
me, and it works right inside Xcode now. So, that would have been something that I could have done, but it would have taken me a week just to get past the reading and study to get started.
Have you guys tried, after coding with an agent, to do a completely non-agent code of something new
Mm-hmm.
from scratch? And
I have.
how does that experience feel to you now?
It does feel like annoyingly slow in certain areas. But it always was like that. I had ideas in the past that I never did. It's like, oh, I would love this. Not because I want to make an open source project and I want a lot of people to use it. All of my open source projects are motivated by a single idea. Hey, this should really exist. I don't care if anybody uses it. I don't care if it becomes popular. I don't care if it solves somebody else's problem. It bothers me that it doesn't exist in the world. there's something like, I don't know, kind of shallow about my approach in that way. Like, this must exist. I might go to a friend's house at a party and they've got a bunch of fridge magnets, and I cannot stop what I'm doing until I've made weird sentences on the fridge, because the sentences must exist. It doesn't mean anything.
Eric was doing
like
that
how
30
open source.
Eric was doing that 30 years ago. So that's like, that hasn't changed.
This is impulse. This should exist. And there's so much work to build the scaffolding around most software projects. The imports, which one do I want to import? Okay, I haven't done parsing, and I was doing this parsing thing the other day, and I was doing it from scratch. I was like, you know what? I haven't written a parser in Haskell in a long time. That sounds like a fun afternoon project. It's like, okay, there used to be these different parsing libraries. Okay, they're still there. Okay, I don't remember exactly how to, and I just like read the documentation, try the thing, come back. Oh, that's not the right invocation. And that's fundamentally, and it never felt that way, it's not really meaningful knowledge to have. Like, oh, I remember in this library, I have to call this method in this way with these arguments. Who gives a shit? Like, it doesn't matter.
You had sent around that paper about how somebody had done a study and found that using these AI tools, people start to lose their persistence.
Yes,
So
that freaked me out a lot. Yeah.
they kind of lose the ability to learn because of the fact that they know the AI can do this thing so easily that it just doesn't seem to be any point to persisting and trying to solve the problem yourself. I think about that a lot now. I've been trying to teach myself Lean, the language Lean.
Oof.
It's hard, even for simple things, and I get really frustrated with it. And I think in the back of my mind, I could ask Gemini to do this in 4 seconds and just be done with it. And I do worry about that because it just seems like we are kind of handing over the reins a little bit too much.
We're training ourselves that there's an easier path and we don't even have to bother knowing the thing anymore. That freaks me out, Mike. That paper freaked me out.
It's funny. I actually feel like in one dimension, in a weird dimension, I've moved my tenacity and persistence out of the get the code to do the basic thing I want to, and into the like, if I had an unlimited set of analysts working for me, I would just work on this problem until I finally got the answer. Like, I wouldn't give up. Like I'm applying this to a slightly different paradigm than like pure coding, where in the finance paradigm, like if you had an analyst working for you or 3 of them, like you can only ask them to look at this problem so many times, so long before you finally have to say, okay, we'll revisit this in 6 months. But here, I mean, I'm on a 3rd million token long session. So I'm at almost 3 million tokens on one very narrow analyst problem where we've gone down a rabbit hole, it doesn't work. We've gone down another one, it doesn't work. We've gone down a third. It's like every time I'm like, show me the plots, show me the graphs. What's the statistical power here? Does this make sense? How would this work? And I feel like I can put my teeth in it to a point where I never have to give up. I can just keep moving on the problem, the analytical problem, not a coding problem, but like my tenacity is actually higher because I don't have the human pushback of, oh my God, man, like we've been doing this for months. Like, can we just like work on something new? Instead, it's days and it's just me and how much appetite I have to get to the answer. So it's a little bit different, but in that silo, I feel like I'm actually more tenacious and more persistent about what's going on and what's the truth at the bottom of this.
I want to say this is a thing we've heard a lot from various people in the broader world, is that there's something about these tools that compel people to just keep using them.
Yeah.
Karpathy talks about like psychosis. And McKinney talks in his article about, and his blog posts about waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning and just not being able to stop thinking about the problem. And I'm not sure, I think Karpathy may be right. It's maybe like a slight mental health issue or something.
Yeah, but I wanted to raise Wes McKinney. So Wes McKinney, if you have not heard of him, he is the creator of Pandas. very well known in the Python and data science communities for that. And he's worked on a lot of projects in sort of adjacent to that, related to that. And he had this post called the Mythical Agent Month. Now, I think you sent this to me, Mike, and I loved this piece. And as I read it, I was like, oh, I bet Mike just loved this piece because he's got the Fred Brooks, he's got the Silver Bullet, he's got Mythical Man Month in there. He's calling on the right, like he's ringing the right bells. He says, like a lot of people, I found that AI is terrible for my sleep schedule. In the past, I'd wake up briefly at 4 or 4:30 in the morning to have a sip of water, use the bathroom. Now I have trouble going back to sleep. I could be doing things. Before I'd get a solid 7, 8 hours a night. Now I'm lucky when I get 6. I've largely stopped fighting it. Now when I'm rolling around restlessly in bed at 5:07 a.m. with ideas to feed my coding agents, I just get up and start my day. And I am ashamed to admit this has happened to me. Not more than a dozen times over the last few months, but it has happened to me. I'll wake up and be like, yeah, I was trying to get it to finish this problem, and my mind just starts spinning, and I'm not going back to sleep at that point. And then I'm a little bit ashamed about this.
The other thing that happens is it's like, God damn it, I'm out of tokens again. Where can I get more tokens?
Every time that happens to me, I'm like, oh, nice. I should go outside. What the hell am I doing here? This is great. Great reminder that this doesn't matter fundamentally what I'm doing.
Yeah, I like this McKinney piece a lot. And I think, one of the key arguments that he makes is kind of like what Bob was saying, is that the way McKinney states it, which is taken from Fred Brooks's language, is that these tools take away a lot of the accidental complexity. They sort of get you past those barriers, but they don't really eliminate the essential complexity, as Brooks would say.
Yeah. That seems true. He says this is technical debt on an unprecedented scale accrued at machine speed. And then he writes, code, and I agree with that. He says coding agents are probably the most powerful tool ever created to tackle accidental complexity. And I've actually had trouble with that claim because, like Bob, I found these agents are doing these like stupid imports in the middle of the file, and it's like they're rewriting the same crap multiple times. That's accidental complexity, okay? They could maybe tackle it, but they also are pretty good at creating the crap. But maybe he's talking about just writing code in general. I never have. He says, I basically do not write code anymore. Write tons of code in a language. Go. I've never written by hand. The productivity gains are enormous. And I say this as someone burning north of 10 billion tokens a month across Claude, Codex, and Gemini. But Brooks's no silver bullet argument predicts exactly the problem I'm experiencing in my agentic engineering. The accidental complexity, not a problem anymore, but what's left is essential complexity, which is always the hard part, and agents can't reliably tell the difference.
It's hard to point to a specific thing, but like one thing that I've noticed with the agents is that they don't typically think abstractly. There's not usually an attempt to identify things which look similar and build some higher level abstraction that they're based on.
I think I had a different experience, but related to that, which is if I tell it did this thing wrong, it patches that exact case. It doesn't come up with the generalized solution. It will just lay like, oh, okay, well then on that condition in that one situation, I'll make sure to give you exactly the output you expected to get. And you have to back it up and say, no, don't do that. I mean, I've experienced, I think my experience in my like sort of the whole arc of my career spent a lot of time where it was like, I want to work on this, but it's 7:30 in the morning and no one's at work and no one's ready. And I got to wait until we all get in and everybody does their morning routine and we have our 9:00 meeting and I'm going to make this note so we can sit down and talk about it. And then we're going to figure out what we might want to do. And when I was working in financial markets, we're going to wait till the market closes at 4 and then we'll try to work on this for an hour and a half. And much like McKinney, I have this experience now where I'm like, oh, well, what if I did this block of work and I have no barrier, right? I can just go do that block of work right now and get it built. And it's a blessing and a curse. There's more times than I would care to admit where I have chosen to work on these projects instead of doing real things with real people. Because it's like, I can get this done. I don't know. It's just, but it's so satisfying to get these things built, just build the thing. And like you said, Eric, I want it in the world. I want these things built. I want them done. I want them out there. And I feel like there's this big unlock right now where it could be out there. So let's make it happen.
Yeah, I guess I try to keep it in. I try to keep a good perspective on it, though. It's like I'm not solving problems that are going to save people's lives or improve things. I'm really the guy at the party arranging words and magnetic poetry, fridge magnets, and I can't leave, even though I told everybody I'm leaving and I said bye. I'm leaving your party until I finish whatever stupid magnetic fridge poetry poem I'm working on. That's like that to me is what we're all doing. And there's millions of people using agent coding to like, yeah, sure, some of them are producing stuff that people are going to use, but then everybody's producing stuff that everybody might potentially use. There's a lot of crap that nobody's going to use because there's so much software being produced as a result of these tools.
Can I tie this back to one of the other themes of this podcast, which is music? Eric, we had a mutual friend in college and he had a lot of CDs. And I remember we would go through his CDs and like only 5 or 10% of them were even worth listening to. There were just like so many CDs. You were like, there's no way all of this can be good. Right? Just the production factor was just so big. So is there a similar mapping here where it's like, yeah, to get the good, we have to produce this massive volume of crap that everyone's going to throw away or ignore anyway? Like, is there a mapping there? Or maybe I've misunderstood the music side of things. Maybe
No.
Mike has input.
That's true about music. The trick with music, of course, is that, taste is subjective. I mean, not my taste. My taste is always accurate. But like when I worked in music recommendations, there was this thing at the time that we called the Britney Spears effect. That'll tell you how long ago this was, but it would be the Taylor Swift effect now. But the idea was that if you're trying to figure out people's taste, if you're looking at the total set of things that they're listening to and trying to compare those to other people's tastes and see where the sort of difference between those two sets are so that you can recommend a person something in this set that they're not already listening to. If you're using that approach, which was pretty common in the day, you had to deal with the fact that everybody was listening to Britney Spears.
Right, exactly.
So a fair thing to say is that most music is not very good. And there's this long tail of stuff that most people never listen to, even though some of it may be very good. So I think there is an analogy there with the software, is that if you just produce so much, some of it's going to end up in that section of the distribution where everybody's using it. One of the things I really liked about McKinney's blog post is he talks about how he tests things and he runs different LLMs, and he makes some comment in there about sometimes his code will be going through like 20 different reviews with different agents. I think about that and I think, okay, that's a higher level of rigor. That's probably a good thing. But then I also think about the fact that we're using electricity
Yeah.
on an unprecedented scale to produce this garbage. Is it going to be worthwhile in the long term of creating this huge collection of software that maybe nobody ever sees? I don't
Let
know.
me take your music analogy further and paint a darker picture for you, and then I want to land the plane using McKinney's how he finishes his piece. So here's my darker picture. Let's say, Mike, there's so much music out there in the world, and suddenly the production of music 10x's or 100x's, and it's a lot of work for me. I didn't mean to call out Mike here, but Bob, you could think about this too. It's a lot of work for me to go out and find music I want. But you know what? I've got this button on my keyboard which calls an agent, which produces music similar to a bunch of stuff I've already listened to. And instead of going out and finding some new crap, I just push that button. This key mapping, I map it to F11. I don't know what that key does. I hit F11 and it plays some pleasing music based on whatever mood I think I want. I want to listen to hip hop or indie rock or jazz or whatever. Boom. And it just starts spewing out music that sounds like stuff I've listened to in the past. That seems more like the future we're producing right now with the way people are producing software.
One of the things that I am a little bit mystified by, and I think this may just be because I'm old, is that people talk about how they're so much more productive with these tools. It's like having a staff. And so if you have this backlog of items and now now it's like having 10 times as many engineers as you had before. And so you can throw them at that backlog. what I would sort of think would happen is that people would be working less.
Mm.
But what actually seems to be happening is that people are just trying to produce 10 times more software. And I personally don't understand that. I don't understand where the 10 times more software is useful, or how people maintain it, or how people, fix it, or
Who's going to deploy all that crap?
Deploy
That's
it.
almost
Yeah,
my question that I ask.
It just seems like there's this like almost frantic urgency to produce more stuff and to occupy the hours of the day making software, and I don't get it. And I think this is probably why I'm going to have to retire soon. But yeah, it's a mystery to me, and I feel a little bit bad about it because I just feel like we're probably producing a lot more software, using a lot more electricity, building a lot more data centers, and not a lot of it's going to turn out to be useful to the world.
What do you think, Bob? You take issue with that?
Yeah, I have a theory of that as you were describing it, or a way to possibly think about it, which is that humans tend to be, in my mind, like more Bayesian than maybe we give them credit for. So they really anchor on their prior beliefs of how the world works and how things are, and it's hard for them to shift and update. And for 50 years now, or longer, you could maybe argue, like, building software has been a path to riches and fame and celebrity, and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. And like, how did you do that? You built software. You built great software. So the prospect of like my project is going to be the next big project, I think, is subtly or not subtly very intriguing to people. And now they think to themselves, well, if I can just get more out there, I'll have more surface area and produce something of value, and it will be valuable. And I think the update that's being missed is that everybody can do that now.
Yeah.
Like the world changed. Like the reason that was valuable, the reason that writing Microsoft Excel was valuable was because it was really hard. Like no one knew how to do it. And it took a lot of time. It took a lot of effort. And once you produced it, people would pay you a lot of money for it, right? One time, and for upgrades and for subscriptions. But now that seems like it's just become, table stakes. Like, sure, you want to write that from scratch? Here's a tool that can go do it for you and produce it. And I think that's been lost a little bit. Like, I think that people are thinking that they're making something new and special, but in reality, they're just joining the chorus of everybody else who thinks they're making stuff that's new and special.
I think that ties into what I wanted to close with here. This is
landing the plane.
Landing the plane. We're going to land the plane on Wes McKinney's blog post here. So this is how he towards the end of his post. This is what he says. He starts talking about taste. Bob, that's a word I associate with you because you really had me thinking about taste. Brooks's argument, McKinney writes, is that design talent and good taste are the most scarce resources. And now with agents doing all the coding labor, I argue that these skills matter more than ever. The bottleneck was never hands on keyboards. The developers who thrive in this new agentic era won't be the ones who run the most parallel sessions or burn the most tokens. They'll be the ones who are able to hold their projects' conceptual models in their mind, who are shrewd about what to build and what to leave out, and exercise taste over the enormous volume of output. Now, I really like this section here in McKinney's piece. I find it completely compelling, but I also find it kind of gratifying because I immediately think, oh, yes, he's describing me. I have taste. I know what not to build. I know that some of the crap I'm doing is magnetic fridge poetry, magnet worthy of like being in the world. I know that it's pointless, okay? Some of the stuff I'm doing. Are you able to hold your project's conceptual model in your mind, Bob? It sounds like you've produced quite a lot of project.
Yeah, mine has I have a pretty good plan, and I definitely say no to the agent more than I say yes. I think that's like kind of a very simple metric. I do more. That's probably not right. Do you have data for that? Why are we even going this way? That tends to be a pretty common set of questions that I pose to agents versus sure, or just go ahead and do that. I think I have some taste in the narrow area that I'm working on, but like you, I think that I would only keep doing it if I thought I had taste. So, it's easy to fool yourself.
Interesting. Well, I think that has been a fruitful discussion. It was interesting to hear about what you're working on, Bob, and I'm glad to hear that your personal insight into using beads, Bob. I have not used it, so it's good to hear what it's like to use it for you. I think there are some patterns that are emerging in here, and they're going to continue to be present in whatever iteration of this thing continues on. Hopefully, the no sleep is not a pattern that continues on, though. So this has been Picture Me Coding. Thanks to Bob Farzin for coming and hanging out with us. Bob, it really is a lot of fun having you. You're a great guest for us, and we appreciate your time deeply.
Yeah, very, very happy to come talk. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Bob.
So this has been Picture Me Coding with Eric Yegge, Mike Moll, Bob Farzin, our special guest today, and we will see you again in a couple weeks.
See you next time.